2 years ago, at the age of 35, I experienced the most devastating day of my life. My fiancée, Alexandra, left me for my brother on our wedding day, with the full support of my parents. And now, after all that betrayal, she has come to me for help because of her husband's controlling behavior. An hour before our wedding, Alexandra, 32 degrees Fahrenheit, called to tell me she couldn't go through with it. But the real bombshell? She'd been secretly seeing my brother Nathan, 40 million, for months. And worse, my parents had been aware of their relationship and had even encouraged it. It was like being trapped in one of those movies where everything seems perfect until it all falls apart in an instant. That was my life. I had been in a good place, or so I thought. I was earning a solid income as a senior software developer at a fast-growing computer company, had recently bought a home in a desirable Boston suburb, and was preparing to marry the woman I believed was my soulmate. Alexandra and I had spent 5 years building our future together, mapping out plans for the life we wanted. I truly thought we were on the same page. Alex, as I called her, was a marketing executive when we first met at a tech convention. I'll never forget how she lit up the room. She was brilliant, driven, and had this natural energy that made every space feel alive. Our shared love of independent video games and niche science fiction films sparked an instant connection. On our first date, we talked for 6 hours, so long that the restaurant staff practically had to kick up. Looking back, I can see all the red flags I ignored because I was so captivated by her. One of the first signs should have been how she treated service staff. She was polite on the surface, but her tone often carried a subtle, undeniable condescension. Then there were the lies. At first, they were small, harmless, you might think. She'd say she was out with friends when she was really working late. Over time, I noticed how everything seemed to revolve around her needs. She never apologized when she hurt my feelings and insisted on having things her way. I convinced myself that relationships required compromise, that no one was perfect. My family's dynamic was another glaring warning sign I overlooked. I work in information technology and do well for myself, but nothing extraordinary. My brother Nathan, on the other hand, is the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. Nathan built a multi-million-dollar information technology company in his early 30s, and growing up I was constantly reminded of his success. "Why can't you be more like Nathan? Or Nathan would have done it this way," were phrases I heard all too often. My parents, both in their 60s, never hid their favoritism. I remember one Christmas when I was 15. My parents' coffee machine was breaking down, so I spent the entire year saving up to buy them a high-quality replacement. On Christmas Day, Nathan showed up late with an envelope announcing that he'd booked them a cruise. That's all they could talk about for the rest of the evening. My carefully chosen, meticulously wrapped coffee machine sat forgotten under the tree. Moments like that were endless. Every decision I made was scrutinized, every accomplishment compared to Nathan's. It was exhausting. When I introduced Alex to my family, I should have noticed the way her eyes lit up when Nathan talked about his business ventures. I should have picked up on how she gravitated toward him at family gatherings, their conversations growing more personal and intense over time. But I was too focused on wedding preparations and our supposed future together to see what was happening. Our wedding day started like any other milestone day, full of anticipation and excitement. Alex had fallen in love with the vineyard venue we'd chosen, nestled just outside the city with breathtaking views of the mountains. The flowers, music, and meticulously planned menu were all set. That morning, as I stood in my hotel room struggling with my tie for the 100th time, my phone rang. It was Alex. Her voice was cold and detached as she told me she couldn't marry me. Then came the crushing revelation. Nathan was her true love. She wasn't even apologetic. She said she had to follow her heart. I stood there, my hands trembling so much I could barely hold the phone, as she explained how they'd been seeing each other for months. She hoped I'd understand someday. They tried to fight their feelings but couldn't. The worst part, my parents had known. When I arrived at the venue to deal with the fallout, I discovered that Nathan had told them everything that morning. Instead of warning me, they'd been busy managing the situation to avoid scandal. My mom, Catherine, 62 degrees Fahrenheit, actually had the audacity to tell me, "Maybe it's for the best. You wouldn't want to marry someone who doesn't love you." My dad, as always, just nodded along, more worried about their social circle at the golf club than about the pain I was going through. The hours that followed were a blur. Vendors were cancelled, guests were confused, and pitying glances were everywhere. My best man handled the logistics while I sat in a back room, still wearing my wedding suit, trying to process how my entire life had crumbled in a single morning. Some guests had already arrived, dressed to the nines, when my parents announced there'd been an unfortunate situation and the wedding was off. Months later, the full scope of their betrayal came to light. A mutual acquaintance revealed that my parents had actively encouraged Alex to leave me for Nathan. They'd assured her she'd have a better life with him, even promising financial support if she chose him over me. They'd been orchestrating this betrayal for months, while smiling in my face and helping plan my wedding. I even saw texts from my mom setting up accidental meetings between Alex and Nathan, giving them opportunities to grow closer. She told Alex that Nathan had always admired her and that they'd be a better match. Knowing how ambitious Alex was, my parents even offered to help her start her own marketing consultancy if she left me for him. That day, I walked away from everything. I left behind my job, my home, and my family. I moved to a distant state, cutting off all communication. I updated my phone number, my email, everything. The house I had purchased was filled with memories I couldn't bear, so I let the bank foreclose on it. Facing the awkward silences of mutual acquaintances, the pitying looks from co-workers who had been invited to the wedding, it was all too much. The only person I kept in contact with was my therapist, whom I began seeing to help process the trauma. Through therapy, I came to understand that this wasn't just about a failed relationship. It was a profound betrayal by everyone who was supposed to love and support me. My therapist helped me unravel how my parents' favoritism had shaped my relationships and even my sense of self. Those sessions were hard, but over the last 2 years they became the foundation for rebuilding my life. I rented a modest apartment in a quiet neighborhood and got a new job with another computer company in Denver. Slowly, I started piecing my life back together. I joined a local hiking group, made new friends who didn't know my past, and found acceptance for who I was, not the shadow of someone else. I embraced meditation, focused on improving my mental health, and learned how to find happiness within myself. Eventually, I even started dating again. Cautiously at first. Just coffee or dinner, nothing serious. Each experience reminded me that Alex's toxic behavior and my family's dysfunction didn't define my worth. I learned to trust my instincts, to spot red flags instead of justifying them. Work became a refuge where I could thrive without the constant comparison to Nathan. I threw myself into new projects and earned a promotion, gaining the respect of my colleagues. For the first time, my achievements stood on their own, unmeasured against anyone else's success. I built a new life, free from the weight of my family's expectations. My friends valued me for who I truly am. I even started thinking about buying a home again, something I'd never imagined reclaiming after all I'd lost. I thought that chapter of my life was closed. And then last week, Alex showed up at my door. When I opened it, I barely recognized her. The confident, polished marketing executive I once knew was gone. In her place stood someone who looked exhausted, defeated. Her makeup, once flawless, couldn't hide the dark circles under her eyes, and she wore a simple sweater and pants instead of her usual designer outfits. She was trembling, not from the cold Denver night, but from what I soon realized was deep, unrelenting anxiety. I let her in, and as we sat in my living room, the same space where I'd been rebuilding my life for 2 years, she told me everything. At first, as my parents had predicted, her marriage to Nathan seemed like a dream. He showered her with expensive gifts, helped her start her own marketing firm, and bought her a house in one of Boston's wealthiest neighborhoods. But the dream quickly turned into a nightmare. Beneath Nathan's charming exterior was the person I'd always known him to be, a manipulator. Alex described how he slowly took control of every part of her life. It began with suggestions about her business decisions, which soon turned into demands about who she could work with. Eventually, he joined the board of her company, taking over final decisions on all contracts. Then came the gaslighting. He would move things around their home and blame her for it. He'd contradict conversations they'd had hours earlier and tell others she was losing her mind whenever she tried to confront him. The worst part? Our parents, especially my mother, Catherine, enabled it all. "Your mum tells me I'm lucky to have Nathan," Alex said, wiping her tears. "She says I need to try harder to make him happy. When I told her about his threats to take everything from me if I left, she said, 'That's just how successful men protect their interests.'" What broke my heart even more than Alex's story was hearing about my nephew. Alex told me that Nathan had started exerting the same controlling behavior over their son, who is only 18 months old. Nathan has strict rules for everything: the baby's toys, colors, even his sleep schedule. If the baby cries during one of Nathan's important calls, he becomes furious and blames Alex for not managing him properly. When I cautiously brought up the idea of divorce, Alex broke down. Nathan had made it clear that he would ruin her if she tried to leave. He has the money, the connections, and, most devastatingly, the unwavering support of our parents. Nathan has threatened to take full custody of their son, force Alex to cover all legal expenses, and destroy her career in marketing so she could never work again. That's why she came to me. She needs me to testify in court, to reveal the truth about our family, Nathan's true character, and the patterns of deception and manipulation that have been going on for years. She believes my testimony could help her case, especially in securing custody of her son. I didn't argue, I didn't yell, I simply said no. I simply told her that I couldn't help. The look on her face will likely haunt me forever. The truth is, I've spent the past 2 years in therapy learning that it's not my responsibility to fix other people's problems. I've worked incredibly hard to set boundaries and distance myself from my family's toxic influence. Yet, the next day, my phone was flooded with messages. Somehow, news of Alex's visit had spread. People I hadn't spoken to since the disastrous wedding suddenly had a lot to say. They called me cowardly, selfish, and heartless. Alex's former maid of honor even sent me an email accusing me of proving my family right, that I was too weak and self-centered to step up when it mattered. The hypocrisy is staggering. Not one of these people stood up for me 2 years ago. No one offered support or pointed out the manipulation I endured at the hands of my family. Now, they expect me to risk the life and mental stability I've painstakingly rebuilt to help the very woman who betrayed me. One message hit especially hard. There's an innocent child involved, your nephew. A mutual friend wrote that Alex didn't deserve to suffer for what she did to me. And that's the thought I can't shake. That little boy, my nephew, has been on my mind constantly. He didn't ask to be born into this chaos. None of this is his fault. If what Alex said is true, and I believe it, given my own experiences with Nathan, he's growing up in a household that could leave him scarred for life. I know what it's like to live under Nathan's shadow, but would it be worse for his son? Getting involved would mean reopening old wounds, reintegrating myself into my family's dysfunction. I'd have to deal with Nathan's manipulation, our parents' enabling, and possibly become a target of retaliation. It could cost me everything I've worked so hard to rebuild over the past 2 years. And so I'm at a crossroads. Do I maintain the boundaries I've established, prioritize my stability and mental health, and stay out of it? Or do I risk it all to help protect an innocent child from the same toxic family dynamics that nearly destroyed me? To be honest, I don't know what to do. My therapist has advised me to carefully consider what I can realistically offer without jeopardizing my own well-being. But every time I try to think through it logically, I see that little boy's face in my mind. I need help, Reddit. Am I being selfish for refusing to get involved? Or am I right to protect the peace I've finally found? Is there even a way to help my nephew without being dragged back into the family chaos? Second update. It's been a week since my last post, and somehow things have spiraled further out of control. Despite hoping that ignoring everything would make it go away, my family seems determined to drag me back into their dysfunction. Yesterday morning I got an email from Nathan. When I saw his name in my inbox, my stomach dropped. The message was short but chilling. I heard our ex-fiancée came to you in tears. If you know what's best for you, stay out of family affairs. You've been gone for 2 years. Don't change that now. I stared at those words for a long time, feeling a mix of sadness and, surprisingly, anger. The supposedly successful, charismatic brother threatening his own sibling because he fears losing control. The irony would almost be laughable if it weren't so pathetic. But Nathan wasn't the only one to break the 2-year silence. While I was at work, my mother, Catherine, called. Even though I should have ignored it, some part of me still freezes when I see Mom on my caller ID. Her voice was as sickly sweet as ever, the same tone she used to manipulate me as a child. Without even a greeting, she began. "Sweetheart, I know Alex came to see you. She's going through a tough time, but that doesn't mean she's thinking clearly. Nathan is trying so hard to be a good husband and father." When I didn't respond, she switched tactics. "Your brother's company is at a critical juncture. This divorce nonsense could ruin everything he's built. Don't you think he deserves better from his own brother?" Finally, I found my voice. "And don't you think I deserve better from my own family?" The silence on the other end was deafening. Then came the guilt trip. We've always wanted what's best for both our boys. Parents make mistakes, but families need to stick together. Nathan needs you to be the bigger person right now. I hung up. Minutes later, my phone started buzzing with texts from extended family. Catherine had apparently rallied the troops. Aunts, uncles, and cousins, none of whom bothered to check on me after the wedding fiasco, suddenly had a lot to say about family unity. One cousin wrote, "Your parents aren't getting any younger. Do you really want them spending their final years worrying about raising their grandchild in a broken home?" Another added, "Real men don't hold grudges. Be the bigger person." The most infuriating message came from my father's sister. "Your brother made mistakes, but he's given Alex everything she ever wanted. By supporting her, you're just enabling her ungrateful behavior." It's incredible how they've twisted this narrative. In their minds, I'm the villain for refusing to uphold their perfect family facade. They're so invested in Nathan's image as the golden child that they'll ignore any evidence of his abusive behavior. Third update. After my last post, I spent several sleepless nights grappling with what to do next. Ultimately, the situation resolved itself, though not in the way anyone might have expected. Let me explain what happened and why I made the choices I did. First, I need to make something clear. Following Catherine's manipulative call and Nathan's threatening email, I had a pivotal therapy session. My therapist and I discussed the long-standing family pattern. They create a problem, pressure me to fix it, and then use my efforts to perpetuate their toxic system. She emphasized that getting directly involved would only reinforce this cycle. However, she also made an important point. There are ways to help without re-engaging with their manipulation or sacrificing my mental health. That realization shaped my decision. I chose to file a detailed anonymous report with Child Protective Services, CPS. I didn't take this step lightly. Over 3 days, I meticulously gathered evidence, including screenshots of family texts, Nathan's threatening email, and messages from relatives attempting to guilt-trip me. I also included everything Alex had shared about Nathan's abusive behavior toward their son. The report went beyond the immediate situation. I provided context about Nathan's manipulative tendencies and our family's history of enabling his actions. I included specific incidents, like the time our parents covered up Nathan's drunk driving in college, settled a harassment lawsuit on his behalf, and used their connections to shield him from accountability. Additionally, I included information about potential financial irregularities my former co-worker had mentioned. While this might not directly impact CPS's investigation, I thought it painted a fuller picture of Nathan's character and the extent of his manipulation. The hardest part was waiting. Because the report was anonymous, I knew I wouldn't get updates. CPS investigations take time, but I felt confident I had taken a step to protect my nephew without compromising my own boundaries. Then, things escalated faster than I anticipated. 3 days after I filed the report, Nathan bombarded me with angry messages. Each one was more unhinged than the last. You think you can hide behind anonymity? I know it was you. You've just made the biggest mistake of your life. I'll make sure you never work in tech again. You think you're safe in Denver? Watch your back. You're dead to this family. Remember that. You chose this. Catherine's reaction was equally telling. She left me a voicemail that still echoes in my mind. How could you do this to your own family? We gave you everything, and this is how you repay us? Nathan is devastated. They're investigating him like a common criminal. His reputation could be ruined. I hope you're happy with yourself. What stood out to me was that neither Nathan nor Catherine denied the allegations. Their fury wasn't about false accusations. It was about my audacity to expose the truth. Even my father, who had mostly stayed silent throughout this ordeal, revealed his true colors. He sent me a formal letter written by his lawyer threatening to disinherit me unless I fixed this situation immediately. The irony of disowning someone who had already cut ties with the family wasn't lost on me. Then I received a message from Alex. It was brief and had a tone that was different from the others. I know it was you. Thank you. I'm sorry for everything. Those 9 words hit me harder than all of Nathan's threats combined. They were the first real acknowledgement of guilt I had ever gotten from anyone involved in this mess. Through rumors, I learned that Alex had gained the leverage she needed because of CPS's involvement. Nathan's threats about taking full custody were no longer as significant as an investigation was already underway. With the investigation in motion, Alex had been able to secure emergency temporary custody of their son. The response from the family, however, has been explosive. My inbox is flooded with messages from distant relatives accusing me of betraying my family and destroying it. Former family friends are posting cryptic, passive-aggressive comments on social media, mourning how jealousy divides families. The strange part is I'm no longer as affected by their words as I once would have been. Thanks to 2 years of therapy and self-reflection, I now see their manipulation for what it is. Every guilt trip, every attempt to get me to reconsider my decision only reinforces that I made the right choice. As my therapist reminded me, my family is upset because I refused to play my assigned role in their dysfunction, not because I have done anything wrong. By choosing to protect my nephew through the proper channels instead of covering up for them, I broke the cycle that has been in place for many decades. The fallout has been intense but revealing. In response, I've had to take several precautionary steps. I alerted security at my workplace to the potential for harassment and enlisted the help of a lawyer to protect myself from any possible retaliation. I've had to go to great lengths to keep my social media presence private and increase my personal security. I didn't want to have to take these measures, but they were necessary for my peace of mind. Unexpectedly, I've also received support. Some cousins who had remained silent until now have privately expressed pride in my decision to stand up to the family. I've even received calls from 2 of Nathan's former employees who are willing to testify on Alex's behalf. Some of my old friends who initially condemned my choice have now changed their stance after hearing the full story. Above all, I feel at peace with my decision. Yes, there may be consequences. Nathan might try to undermine my career. The family may follow through with their threats, but for the first time in my life, I am not letting fear of their reactions guide my choices. To the person who messaged me, accusing me of cowardice for reporting anonymously rather than confronting Nathan directly, this is not about conflict or revenge. It's about finding a way to help without sacrificing my mental health or dragged back into their toxic web. I have no idea what will happen next. Custody battles can drag on for many months, even many years, and CPS investigations can take many different directions. But I know that I've maintained my boundaries while doing everything I could to protect an innocent child. I found a way to help without burning myself out in the process. Thank you to everyone who has been following my story and offering advice. Through your support, I've learned that doing the right thing doesn't always mean being confrontational or dramatic. Sometimes it's about finding a way to protect yourself while still making a difference. Remember, you don't have to choose between protecting yourself and helping others if you find yourself in a similar situation. There is often a middle ground, even if it's not immediately clear. Just because you've grown up in a toxic family system doesn't mean you have to perpetuate it. In conclusion, I've realized that the worst thing I thought could ever happen to me was losing my fiancée to my brother 2 years ago. Looking back, that was the wake-up call I needed to break free from a dysfunctional family dynamic. Sometimes your lowest point can be the catalyst for a better life. This will be my final update. I know I made the right choice for both myself and my nephew, no matter what the future holds.